Story 1. Flying Objects. I was in college, and I lived in an old house that had been made into an apartment. The upstairs and downstairs, two separate living quarters. Odd things happened that I never really tried to think about, except when I was home alone. Doors swung open with no wind, and no one behind them. Things would disappear that we had set down, only to reappear days, weeks, or several months later, in the middle of the floor, or in places where you could not have missed them. One night, my roommate went out, and I was home alone. I'd gone to bed and fell into a deep sleep, only to be woken up not more than a couple hours later. There were 3 pounds, so hard that I thought I felt the wall shake, and then I heard the sound of glass breaking. There were a couple seconds of silence, then 3 more pounds, and again, the sound of glass breaking. I've never been so scared. I thought someone was breaking in, but then there was silence again. Eerie, cold silence. I laid in that position for over an hour, waiting for my roommate to come home. No one could have moved around in that house without me hearing them. The floorboards were in such bad shape that there was no way possible for someone to be walking around without making them squeak. I finally heard my roommate come in. I listened to her walk into her room. Then I heard steps coming back out. I crept into the kitchen, which was between our rooms. She looked at me. I must have been completely white as a ghost. She looked at me with wide eyes and said, "What happened to my room?" I started crying, and she hugged me. I told her what I heard and how long I'd been waiting, without moving, just waiting for her to come home. She told me to follow her, and we went into her room. She had 3 pictures on her wall, hung next to each other. The furthest picture had flown entirely across the room and hit the opposite wall. It bounced straight down and was laying face up. The middle picture had flown straight down at the floor. The nail it had been hanging on was bent downward. The last picture had flown off the wall to the right and crashed into her suitcase. She had a suitcase with hard sides, and this picture frame had cut right into it. We searched the whole house. The door was locked when she came home. Nothing else had been broken or touched. The windows were closed and locked. I refused to stay in that apartment alone after that. I always made arrangements to have someone stay with me, or be somewhere else, if there was a possibility of being alone. My roommate and I dug into the history of the house after that incident. We talked to as many people as we could. She finally found out that the house had been a butcher shop before it had been turned into a house. I don't know if that's related to what happened or why our house is haunted, and I don't think I care to know, but I'll never forget that night. Story 2. Just figments of the imagination? It started off slowly. Little things you wouldn't expect. For instance, the doors always seemed to be closing without anyone touching them when there was no wind. You would open a door, and somewhere else in my house, a door would close. Also, almost every night, you could hear a car driving up the driveway, and I would go to look and see who it was, and there would be no car. I live in a small subdivision, and my driveway was the only one that had gravel in it. So I could tell when a car was in my driveway. There was always creaks coming from the side of the house. At first, I thought it was a raccoon. But after continuing every night, I began to get a little worried. Probably the most spooky thing that happened was the fact that every time I was downstairs, all alone in the house, I could hear people upstairs. People walking and talking. I would go upstairs, my heart pounding, to see who it was or what it was, and upstairs would be empty. Downstairs we have a small wall fan that you can turn on by a little switch on the back. Anytime you close one of the downstairs doors, that fan turns on. Sometimes, just randomly, without anyone near that side of the house, the fan will come on suddenly, and I'll go to look, and yep, someone has shut that door, and I'll be the only one in the house. One day, I heard the fan kick on, so I went downstairs to turn it off. I got close to it, and I stopped dead in my tracks. The fan was on all right, but the dial said it was off. Maybe I'm just imagining things, or maybe they're just waiting to show themselves. I do feel an eerie presence all around me. I never feel this when my family's home. I never feel it anywhere else except for this house. There's a coldness, a strangeness that comes into my thoughts. Sometimes just a terror washes over me. like I'm scared to breathe or move. I don't know. There's something weird going on in this house. Maybe I'm not alone. Story 3. Attacked. I stayed home from school. My father was in the military, and as such, my family moved around a lot. During my youth, I probably attended at least 6 schools and lived in even more houses. This was the only house that something like this happened in. Like I said, I stayed home from school that day. I remember going into my parents' room. They were getting ready for work. I fell asleep in their water bed. After everyone had gone, I was awakened by what felt like an intense sense of imminent danger. As I woke up, I remember my heart racing. I grabbed for the padded rails on the waterbed, and then I saw a gray figure above me. I started to feel like it was very hard to breathe. I was very scared. I struggled with the figure even though I couldn't feel it physically or even see myself struggling. I knew I was putting up a fight. Within a few seconds, the gray mist disappeared, and I could breathe again. I jumped out of bed, and I ran into the living room. I sat there all day long on the couch until my parents came home. I told them what had happened, and they told me that it was probably just my imagination. So this is what I started to believe myself. I knew that I wasn't dreaming, because I had grabbed the bed rails. I felt them. I knew I was awake. So the only explanation was that it was my imagination, or I really was attacked by a very fast, gray creature. Or what I believe now, that I was attacked by a ghost or a spirit. In my life, I have never before or since seen a ghost or had anything unexplained happen to me. This has been the only unreasonable, unexplainable thing to ever happen to me. When I think about it now, it doesn't scare me as much as it did when it happened then. I just wish I knew why that ghost wanted to hurt me. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give me a thumbs up. I really do appreciate it. Thanks for listening.